My parents never missed a chance to compare me to my brother. They treated his achievements like sacred proof that he was the pride of the family, while I was the cautionary tale. Even at the breakfast table, they slipped in jabs about how he made all the right choices while I still hadn't figured out life. I learned to swallow the sting and stay quiet. The worst part was that I wasn't even failing. I was working, learning, building something slowly on my own terms. But my path didn't fit their script. My brother became an engineer with a polished career, and from that moment on, they decided nothing I did would ever measure up. Every visit home felt like entering a courtroom where the verdict had already been written. They spoke about him like he was proof they'd been great parents. And they spoke about me like I was the child who slipped through the cracks. Even small things sparked comparisons. If I mentioned being tired, they reminded me that my brother worked longer hours. If I talked about a project, they called it a hobby and said he'd never waste time on something so unstable. They praised him for breathing and criticized me for trying. The real shift happened the night they invited both of us to dinner. I already felt the tension before I stepped through the door. My mom was setting the table with that tight smile she used when she wanted something but wouldn't say it out loud. My father barely greeted me. My brother sat comfortably, fully used to being the center of attention. You've followed the journey this far, and the next part is where everything flips on them completely. Please subscribe our channel, please. Then, halfway through the meal, my dad dropped the line he'd been warming up to all night. He said my brother had proven himself while I was still learning responsibility. He said it with this patronizing sigh, like he was disappointed but unsurprised. Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, more like clarity. For years, I had been living under their belief system, letting their comparisons define how I saw myself. But at that table, with their words hanging in the air, I realized they had no idea who I actually was or what I'd been working toward. They only knew the version of me they'd decided to see, and they were about to find out the truth. The moment that sentence left my father's mouth, the entire table shifted. My mother nodded like it was a fact written in stone. My brother cleared his throat and looked away, pretending he wasn't enjoying being the chosen one. I sat there, hands steady, mind surprisingly calm. I'd heard versions of this insult for years, but this time it didn't land the same way. Maybe I'd finally grown out of believing their narrative. Maybe I'd finally built something they didn't understand enough to belittle. My father continued lecturing me, talking about stability and real careers, as if I hadn't been quietly building a business for the past 2 years. A business I hadn't told them about. A business that had just crossed its first 6-figure month. They still pictured me as someone scrambling for direction, unaware that I had stopped needing their guidance long ago. They didn't know I had moved out on my own terms, paid my own bills, and carved out a life without leaning on anyone. They didn't know because they never asked. My mother jumped in next. She said I needed to grow up and follow my brother's example. She said it with this tired sympathy, like she was pitying me for a future she assumed would collapse. My brother didn't say anything, but the smirk on his face was loud enough. He liked being the golden child, the standard everyone else had to reach. He didn't see how much work it took for me to stay quiet all these years. But that night, staying quiet wasn't an option. My dad leaned back and repeated the same line. Your brother is successful and responsible. Unlike you, he might as well have hammered a nail into the table. The room fell quiet after he said it, as if they were waiting for me to accept my place again. Instead, I put down my fork and asked one simple question. Do you even know what I do? All 3 of them stared at me like the question made no sense. My mother blinked and said, You do online stuff. My father scoffed. Small jobs. Temporary things. My brother shrugged, like he didn't care. That's when I realized the truth. They weren't comparing us based on who we were. They were comparing us based on outdated assumptions, things they never bothered to update. They had built an entire judgment of me from a snapshot taken years ago, and they never noticed how much I'd grown past it. I opened my phone, placed it on the table, and showed them the dashboard of my business. The numbers were right there: revenue, clients, contracts, growth charts they couldn't possibly misunderstand. My mother's eyes widened. My father reached forward, pushing his glasses up to look closer. My brother's smirk disappeared. I told them I ran my own company. I told them I had employees. I told them I had clients overseas. I told them I built something solid from scratch, while they assumed I was wasting time. I didn't brag. I didn't raise my voice. I just laid the truth on the table like a quiet explosion. The silence afterward wasn't the triumphant moment people dream about. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't emotional. It was revealing. They didn't know how to react because their version of me had just collapsed. They had spent years praising one child and underestimating the other without ever realizing the roles had quietly reversed. They weren't proud. They were stunned and a little shaken. My brother finally broke the silence. He asked with this strange disbelief how long I'd been doing all of this. I answered honestly, 2 years. His expression shifted from surprise to something more complicated, jealousy. Maybe he wasn't the only success anymore. My parents' shock turned into guilt. My mother started to apologize, but the words fell apart in her mouth. My father cleared his throat and tried to give advice about managing finances, pretending he still held authority. It didn't matter. The power shift had already happened. I stood up, calm and steady, and told them something I had needed to say for a long time. I wasn't looking for their approval. I had outgrown their version of me long before they realized it. I cared about them, but I wasn't going to shrink myself to fit their expectations anymore. They didn't know how to stop me because, for the first time, I wasn't the child sitting at their table. I was an adult with my own life, my own achievements, my own direction, and they finally saw it. When I walked out of the house that night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave angry. I left free. They might have compared me for years, but now they understood something they never expected. I wasn't behind my brother. I was ahead, just in a direction they never bothered to look. In the days after that dinner, the shift became impossible for them to hide. My mother kept texting, asking when I'd visit. My father softened his tone, suddenly curious about my projects. My brother tried acting friendly again, but the insecurity slipped through every interaction. I didn't reject them. I just stopped chasing them. The space I created made them realize something they never imagined. I wasn't the lost one. I was the one who had built a life without their approval, without their guidance, without their praise. And now they were the ones trying to keep up with me.